Thank you all for coming, especially Kieran, who's got a red handkerchief he's going to wave if it's not going well, and an orange one he's going to wave if he thinks it's okay. Thanks, Kieran. No, I'm really pleased you've all joined me, both physically and online. I am going to be asking you to join in and vote on some things, and if you've got your mobile device, you could set it up now. The URL is pollev.com/Peter T 508. That's pollev.com/Peter T 508. That will come up on each of the slides where I'm asking you to input your ideas. I thought I'd start by telling you why I'm here. You may have noticed I'm a bit of a late developer. I actually became a professor 6 years ago, so the inaugural is a bit late. And throughout my education, I was also a bit of a late developer. I was in the remedial class at my prep school. And I have to say, I've got a lot of bad memories of schooling. At the age of 13, I cried my way through my French Common Entrance oral exam, ending up with 36%. But worse than that, I've been terrified of speaking foreign languages ever since. When I was 16, I was summoned to see my headmaster, who told me I was going to fail all my O-levels because my English was so bad. And then when I got a B for English language, only one of 3 children in the school that year who got a B or above, they queried the result. My daughter at this point said, "Oh, Diddums, did the little privileged white boy not like his private school then?" And of course, that's exactly the point, right? If the system doesn't work for a privileged little white boy like me, just think how much worse it is for those people that schooling systematically disadvantages, as I will show you as we go through. And anyway, as we went on, I had to redo my A-levels. I went to university, got really excited about new technology and the use of computers. I wrote an essay about how computers would allow us to transform education. My tutor gave me a 3rd. And as he handed the essay back to me, he looked me in the eye and he said, "Twining, people like you shouldn't be allowed to take advantage of higher education." So here I am, determined that other people will not suffer in the way that I did through my education system. And of course, I also am here thanks to my parents, family, friends, colleagues, and many others who've supported me through good times and bad. And of course, I'm building on all the work of many other people, which I hope I've not corrupted too badly when I've built upon it. And now's the chance for you to try voting. I want you to just give a rough indication of how many years you have spent in formal education. So if you go to that URL, it's pollev.com/Peter T 508. You should see this thing coming up on your screen. I'm just going to make sure it is actually working. There should be a... Oopsie. Yep, okay. And you'll see little green blobs appearing where people have said how long they've had. I can't actually see at the bottom. We've got 22, 23. I'll give you another minute or so to go with this. I mean, what it's showing us is that most of us have actually spent quite a lot of time in formal education. Okay? And that's important because it's really difficult for us to think out of the box. It's difficult for us to reimagine something that's radically different to the existing system. That was brought home to me back in the early, so 22 or 23, when I worked with colleagues here, with home educators, with groups of kids in the East End of London who were failing all their GCSEs so we could have as long with them as we liked because it wasn't going to make any difference to anything. And with some very successful boys in a private school down in Plymouth. And we brought in impossibility thinkers and Guy Claxton with his learning power and theatre groups, and we ran workshops, and we tried to really expand our ideas of what schooling could be like. And they came up with clean toilets, no bullying, starting a bit later in the day, a bit more flexibility and more ICT. And it's like, this is frustrating. And then Kieran, bless him, again, he hasn't got any of his handkerchiefs out yet, which is a bit worrying. Then Kieran said, look, we should give them a lived experience of something radically different. Let's take them into Second Life. This was in 2006. At the point, there were all sorts of salacious things in the press about what was happening in Second Life. But we thought that was a really good idea, so we did. So we took hundreds of 13 to 65-year-olds into an island in Second Life with the intention of giving them radically different experiences of what it could be like to be supported in your learning. And I'll be drawing on some examples from that later on this evening. I'm also going to be drawing on some work on the NP3 project, which was looking at children's use of digital technology outside school, and then how that influenced, or the extent to which it influenced, practice inside school. And I'm going to be particularly drawing upon the 44 children who we looked at in more depth outside school to see how they were using technology, what they were doing with it. So, what am I going to talk about in the next 35 minutes or so? I'm going to try and justify my claim that schooling is problematic. I'm going to unpack some elements of a better system, particularly focusing in on how we teach and what we teach. I'm then going to look at, well, so how do we get from here to where we want to be? And then I'll try and pull it all together. I usually encourage heckling, but because I've only got 40 minutes, I'm going to discourage heckling on this occasion. So, let's start with, is schooling the problem? And I think in order to answer that question, you have to have some view about what you think the purpose of schooling is. Brian Kaplan has written this comprehensively boring book demonstrating that schooling is really good at signalling kids who are good at conforming, who are compliant, who are reasonably academically able, and who work reasonably hard. And if that's what schooling should be about, then it's doing a really good job. But I'm not convinced I think that's what schooling should be about. But I thought it'd be fun to see your views. So again, if you go to polyv.com/PeterT508, you'll be able to move these things up and down and rank them in the order you think they should go. If you think that I haven't got the right purpose, and remember it's what it should be, not what it is, but what the purpose of schooling should be, then you can add your own suggestion of what you think the purpose should be. As with all of these things, there isn't a right answer. This comes down to your values, your beliefs about what you think the purpose of schooling should be about what we think is important in the world today. Fun. Ah, there's a nice idea. Was that you, Kieran? You can tell, there's always one, isn't there? This handkerchief isn't out yet. Let's see if I can scroll up and down this thing and see what happens. So you can see what's happening here. Can I scroll up and down? No, it doesn't want me to scroll up and down. You can only see the ones at the top. Okay, well, you can carry on voting for a minute, but most of us seem to be agreeing that it's about preparing people to live in a world today and in the future. I'm going to kind of outline my vision and what my values are about this. And my vision really for education is that it should lead to individual fulfillment and universal well-being. And of course, universal well-being must include rhinos. Actually, and honeybees. Because if we don't look after the flora and fauna, ultimately we're doomed too. And I'm going to try and persuade you that school isn't doing that very well. Okay, I'm going to start with a recent survey from 2018. It is American, which I know is slightly problematic, and is a relatively small sample of 500 people. These are all American youths who'd left school and were then asked to reflect back about their experience of being in high school. 37% said that they felt afraid of making mistakes most of the time. And anyone who knows anything about learning will understand that if you're scared to make mistakes, you're probably not in a very good learning environment. 51% said they were stressed all the time or most of the time. 51%. 44% said they were bored all or most of the time. And 52% didn't think school prepared them very well for life after school. And then we go on and we look at issues to do with behaviour. And, just recently, last month, the government announced a £10 million scheme to crack down on behaviour and find new punishments and rewards to control the little so-and-sos. a 34 times increase in the use of drugs to control the behaviour of children with ADHD. An increase in the number of exclusions, and just too many exclusions. And in all of these examples, the children are the problem. There's no question that it might be the school that's the problem. No, the kids are a problem, so we'll drug them, we'll get rid of them. And of course, you've got an increasing number of people opting out of the state education system and home educating. And then this one, off-rolling, persuading people that they will leave your school. And I read this, and I looked at that first word. Unsurprisingly, our inspectors expect the system to be inequitable. That's outrageous. I want to be part of the system where the inspectors write outrageously some of our children are discriminated against. And of course, the whole system is designed so that around a third of the kids have to fail for the others to be seen to succeed. That's fundamentally flawed. How can you have an education system that is designed to fail a third of its learners? So, I hope I've convinced you that schooling is a problem. And the question is, what can we do about it? So I'm going to start trying to unpack some elements of a better system. I'm going to start with how we teach, with pedagogy. And I have this kind of naive view that how we teach ought to reflect how children learn. Seems to make sense to me. And of course, we're used to the idea of learning by being told. Hey, look, I'm here, standing up doing it. And we're also used to the idea of learning by doing. But in school, learning by doing is usually decontextualized. You know it's decontextualized in the science experiment when you don't get the result the teacher expects. And rather than saying, oh, that's interesting, I wonder what's happening there, let's investigate and find out why you got that result, she's much more likely to say, copy the results off the group next to you and write it up for homework. And then learning through role play. Now, I ought to know about this because I was early years trained, but the Scone Park programme really brought it back to me. This is Trixie, Queen of the Pixies. And she came up to me and she said, Ranger. I was the Scone Ranger in second line. Ranger, will you give me away? What do you mean, Trixie, will I give you away? She said, I want to get married. I want to get married to Wintermute, who was a brain in a jar, as in Futurama. And he also was one of the most challenging characters within Scone Park. And I have to tell you, I wasn't too comfortable about the notion of giving away Trixie to Wintermute. I had this vision in my head at the front of the Daily Mail. Just at the moment where they said, you may kiss the bride. I mean, it was all going to go wrong. So I said, Trixie, I really don't think this is a good idea. And we had this kind of debate over the course of about a week. And she came back to me, I said, it's got to be PG. Everything on the island has to be PG, parental guidance. So she came back and she said, Peter, they have weddings in PG films. So I explained to her my real worry about, head of Department of Education gives away a pixie to a brain in a jar. On the front of the Daily Mail, it really wasn't going to go down well with our funders. She came back to me and she looked at me and she said, Ranger, you do realise this is all pretend, don't you? At which point, they got married. And they had the big white dress, and they had the photographer. The video is on YouTube if you want to go and watch the wedding. And they did the whole bit, and they got to the kissing the bride, which went, kiss the bride, which went fine. And then they had the disco afterwards with virtual champagne. But the important thing is they learned a lot through the process. Getting those disco lights to flash in time to the music is really quite complicated to do. Just coordinating it so that everyone knew a wedding was happening and that the Rolls Royce was made in time and that the priest knew her lines and all that stuff and the camera person was there. There was a lot of organisation and stuff to take place. It was a really powerful learning experience, but it was pretend. And then I learned about learning by becoming. That's me, incidentally. And it was a kind of takeoff because on the main grid, I was Skomer Simpson. Sorry, hence the yellow hair. But anyway, On islands in Second Life, you've got a limit to the number of things you can build on an island, the number of prims, the kind of units of building, 15,000. We exceeded that in about 3 weeks, because we said to the people on the island, you can build anywhere you like above 200 metres. So I went back to the community and I said, look, it's your island, how are you going to sort this problem? And it was a problem, because when your avatar rendered on the island, you came in with no clothes on, which was quite embarrassing for some of the members of the community. And you couldn't move, and nothing would work. So anyway, they decided they'd investigate different forms of governance, which they did, and they decided democracy was the way to go, which we all know is a mistake, because benign dictatorship, so long as you can maintain the benignness, is clearly much more efficient. But they set up 7 government departments, and they had elections, and they elected the officers, and they had a planning department, and they had planning officers. And the first thing the planning officers did is they came up with building regulations. And they went round slapping notices on all the buildings saying, if you haven't got planning permission within a week, we're going to delete your building. Now, I am telling you, there is absolutely nothing pretend. If you spent 40 hours creating something, if someone comes along and deletes it. There were some very powerful discussions between members of the community, and those planning officers were not pretending. They were the planning officers, they were deleting people's buildings, and the reactions were real. It was an incredibly powerful, emotional experience, and they learned a lot about negotiation and actually about red tape and all sorts of other things as well. Very powerful. And this got reinforced for me on the MP3 project, where I was looking at kids' use of technology at home and how they learnt to become competent users of technology at home, those of them who did, because they didn't all. This is Rory. He was 11. He was a gamer. He made mods, so he extended games, and he then shared those extensions with other people. He also filmed himself doing things within Minecraft. He actually also made all sorts of movies and put them on YouTube and stuff. And the way he'd learned was his mum, when he was 7, bought a book on Minecraft and worked through the book with him until he got better than she was, at which point she fell to the wayside. And he carried on, and he was then allowed to interact with his friends, people he knew in the physical world he could interact with online. And then gradually he was allowed to interact with other people in Minecraft who he didn't know in the physical world. And he became really sophisticated in knowing where to go for help. And he was inducted into the Minecraft community and became a valued member of that community who other people then started coming to when they needed help and support. And then we had Latifa. Latifa was a Somalian refugee, aged 10, living in a small flat in North London, shared a bed with her mum. She made YouTube videos. She made skits of being a parent or being a teacher. They were hilarious. And she had a really sophisticated understanding of different genres of YouTube videos. She had a sophisticated understanding of how to present things in an amusing way. And perhaps more importantly, she understood how to interact with people through the comments underneath the videos. And she had some lovely ideas about how to deal with haters and actually turn it into a positive. You're getting me more hits. Keep going. Because people are coming in to read your hate comments, and it's great because I'm becoming more famous. Her brother had made a lot of money through this stuff. But again, the way that she had learnt to do it was being supported and inducted into it by her siblings and her mum. She was amazing because actually, she called herself a techno nerd, but she Googled how do I reinstall Windows because the editing software she used wouldn't run on the latest version of Windows, so she had to roll back to a previous version of Windows. I don't know how many of you can do that, but I think that's pretty clever. And she taught herself how to do it. But because she'd been supported by her family in having the confidence to engage with these things. So, what am I thinking learning is, and this happens to align with a sociocultural perspective. I didn't realise that at the time, but that's where I'd got to. And from a sociocultural perspective, learning is about identity formation. It's about who you are and your place within your communities. It's about becoming a member, participation, in an enduring collection of people, a community, who are mutually engaged in a shared endeavour, who have shared purpose, and shared ways of working, shared valued ways of working. And from a sociocultural perspective, learning is intrinsically motivating. We do it all the time. We can't avoid it. And importantly, knowledge is the ability to act in valued ways in particular contexts. And so learning is something that is personally meaningful and ongoing and always situated. So if I was going to kind of formalize this, from a sociocultural perspective, human learning, we do it because we're interested. We've got a personal goal we want to achieve, which might be entertaining ourselves. It's intrinsically motivating. It happens whenever we can do it inflexibly. It's not timetabled or scheduled. It tends to be something that happens over a prolonged period of time. You don't become expert at being a gamer in Minecraft or making YouTube videos by doing it for 50 minutes. It happens in context. The teacher are the other members of the community, the other club members, and their role is to induct you into the valued ways of being. They're orchestrating your activities and connecting you to the mature practices within that community. And the learner is seen as having expertise, but not experience in that particular community. They've got expertise in other things that they bring to the piece. Okay, so it's about how you bridge between the expertise and experience they've got and the valued ways of working within the new community. And mostly it's about learning through becoming and role play. And in a sense, role play is pretending to be. So it's the first step before you actually become. And that kind of contrasts radically with how we expect people to learn in schooling. And I won't read through that because you can read that yourself. But in a sense, this is another critique of the education system. That actually the way we expect people to learn within formal education does not sit well with how people actually learn. And so we're running against the tide all the time. So what does this mean for how we teach? Bearing in mind that I think how we teach should reflect how we actually learn. Well, first of all, I think it's important to say, it's about multiple approaches. There isn't one right way to do things. You need to look at the needs of the learners and align your approach with the needs of the learner. But trust is really vital. You've got to be able to have the confidence to make mistakes and share and be open and acknowledge your weaknesses. Constructive critical feedback, but notice bidirectional. This isn't just the teacher telling the learner. It's also the learner telling the teacher what they could be doing better. How could you support me more effectively? How helpful was that as feedback to me about what I'm doing? It does involve direct instruction. That doesn't mean didactic standing at the front telling people. Direct instruction is about the learner and the teacher having a shared understanding of what they're trying to do, what the purpose is, and what success will look like, and how they're going to get there. And importantly for me, that doesn't have to come from the teacher to the child. It could be the child telling the teacher what the purposes and goals and success will look like. And of course, that means it's about being agentive and active. It's about collaborating with other people. It's about that participation piece. And it's about bridging between, and I've already said this, bridging between the learner's current expertise and experience and the valued ways of being within the particular community that they are becoming a part of, and inducting them into that new community. But of course, it's also about challenging. It's about pushing people to stretch themselves, but in ways which are achievable, so that you build their self-esteem and their belief in themselves as a learner. And importantly, it's sustained. And that brings us on to the question of curriculum and what do we teach? Because if we're thinking about sustained, we're talking about depth, not breadth. So what should be learned? What does everybody need to learn, given that when we think about schooling, we assume it's something that all our kids are going to go through? Guess what? Your turn. polyv.com/PeterT508. You can't add ones to this. You can just change the order in which they appear. So you move them up and down on your screen, and when you finish, you click the submit button, and then it will be reflected on the screen here. My daughter, bless her, the one who said our diddums, said to me, "Dad, reading should be on this list. It's really important." And I thought, provocative response. 2033, remember it does say 2033. What's important in 2033? Okay? My provocative was, actually, Jess, I don't think reading's going to be that important in 2033. Now, the guy who services my alarm drives in his van, and when an email comes in, the van reads it to him, and he dictates a response. It puts things in his calendar for him. He's still driving this van, right? No reading involved, or writing for that matter. So that was the kind of provocative response, and Jess she's a primary school teacher. She thought reading was really the thing. And then I said to her, actually, the real reason, Jess, is I used to have 36 things on this list, but it took people too long to sort them. And so I just cut it down to a kind of sample of things. It's still quite difficult to make decisions about these things. Let's see what we've got. Oh, look, science facts, pretty low down the list. Yeah, learning to learn, creeping up the list. Being able to ask good questions and evaluate information. So what we're seeing coming up the list here are the kind of things that we might label incorrectly as 21st century skills, because they were around in 1967 when the Plowden report was written. But of course, this is a really difficult question to answer, because none of us know what it's going to be like in 2033. Now, if we just go back 14 years to 2005, now Kodak was still the dominant force in photography. YouTube, the first video was uploaded in April 2005. Facebook.com, the domain name, was bought in August 2005. Netflix was still sending videos through the post. The smartphone didn't come around until 2007. It wasn't even a fantasy in someone's mind at that point. Well, it probably was, because we'd all been trying to play with Palm Pilots and things for ages. But true smartphones didn't come out until 2007. Twitter, 2007. All these other things, 2009 or later. The world has changed phenomenally fast in the last 14 years. And the speed of change appears to be accelerating. So 2033, who knows? But we do know that we face a load of challenges. We face challenges around surveillance capitalism, privacy, data ownership. How would you feel if you got arrested walking down the street in Manchester because you covered your face from the face recognition camera? Happened to somebody last month. They were fined 60 quid. Okay? Is that an invasion of privacy, or do you feel comfortable with that? Biotechnology and genetic engineering. Who decides what characteristics of a human being we should engineer out or engineer in? Will it just be the rich people who can afford the technology? Or should we all have some say in what's appropriate and what's not appropriate? Robotics, AI, and cyborg engineering. What does it mean to be a human being when computers can do the things that we used to call intelligent? What does it mean to be a human being when you can augment our physical capabilities with robotic components? So I can hear what Kieran is saying to Rebecca, because I've got the little gadget in my ear that enhances my hearing. It just changes the nature of what human beings are and how we view ourselves. And of course, you've got all the stuff about automation and employment. This kind of stuff, by 2023, 47% of the US employed population will be unemployable. And then you get the kind of neoliberal argument, yeah, but new jobs will come along. It'll all be fine. And then you get other people saying, yeah, but the new jobs will be automated too. And you'll end up with all the rich people owning the factories and no one with any money to buy anything. So the rich people won't be rich because they'll be making stuff no one else can buy, and the breakdown of market capitalism. What is the purpose of school if most of the population are unemployable? And then we've got all the things to do with demographic and environmental challenges, population growth, increasing age demographics, all the stuff to do with resource sustainability, pollution, and global warming. And attitudes towards mass migration, Trump and his wall. And all of these things lead to greater risk of civil strife and conflict. And I personally think schools ought to be equipping kids not just to address these issues, but to really have a say about how we want the world to be. So my curriculum would look something like this. On the individual fulfillment side, I think it's about identity. It's about finding your passion, your purposes in life. It's about building your self-esteem, your belief in yourself as a learner. It's about getting success and recognition for the things you have done and achieved. And it's about being able to deal with the, I was going to say shit, and I probably shouldn't in an OU inaugural, with all the stuff that is going to get thrown at you through life. So you've got to have the resilience and the persistence to deal with that stuff. And then on the kind of universal well-being side, it's about the participation. It's about our values and understanding and talking about our values. It's about diversity and welcoming and recognizing the importance of diversity. It's about intercultural understanding. And even if we don't agree, at least being able to empathize, to put ourselves in the other person's position and understand their perspective. It's about equity. And rights, remember the rhinos. And obviously sustainability, because otherwise we are all doomed. And then for me, there's the kind of glue in the middle that holds all these things together, which is around the ability to act, about agency. And it's the kind of, those 21st century skilly things. But I've added in things like philosophy and ethics, because, we have some really hard decisions to make around those global challenges. And fundamentally, the only thing we know about 2033 is it's going to be different. And it's going to be continually changing. And so learning to learn for me is probably the single most important thing. And of course, you've got to have content, because you can't do any of that stuff without content. Right? So that kind of, argument, is it content, is it skills, is a complete nonsense, because you can't do skills without content. It's meaningless. And I agree with the Boston Centre for Curriculum Redesign, who say, the content should be the kind of big conceptual ideas that allow us to make sense of the world. The notion of a system. We can have the nervous system, we can have an ecosystem, we can have a law system, all sorts of places where you can have systems. So you can apply that concept of system in lots of different contexts. And there are lots of other big ideas that are really important to help us make sense of the world. And they are the things we should be focusing in on. So to pull it all together so far, my vision is about individual fulfillment and universal well-being. I think my pedagogical approach, the way we teach, is about enhancing human learning. And, we need a curriculum that enhances, that focuses on the content, the skills, and the attributes, bearing in mind that knowledge is about the ability to act in meaningful ways in particular contexts. But, that's pretty tame. I think we need to be a bit more radical. I agree with Kerry Facer, who said, we really need to analyse what is the purpose of school? What could and should school be doing in a world in which actually voice is becoming more problematic and let's not talk about politicians. And so for me, there's an issue around, open to people. Okay, so we're doing away with age and we're saying we'll have people, but we're still talking 4 to 18-year-olds. Why are we still talking 4 to 18-year-olds? Why are we still front-loading all that stuff? Why aren't we making it lifelong, and why aren't we really valuing the older members of our community? Sugatra Mitra and his granny cloud is onto something. And we may be doing away with timetables and 50-minute lessons, but we're still thinking 8:30 to 3:30. Why are we thinking 8:30 to 3:30? Why aren't we saying it's when it fits in with your life? It's when you need it. It's flexible. Open to community. I always love the notion of being open to community and then building the 8-foot security fences. Always seems to me that there's some conflict here. But, we do invite people to come in to visit the school sometimes, and we do occasionally bring kids out of the school into the community. But I think we need to kind of completely rechange the focus here. The school should be at the heart of the community, not a little isolated island in the middle of it. And we need to move away from that focus on individuals learning to individuals learning through enhancing their communities, because it's about individual fulfillment and universal well-being. So, here's my new summary. We've got to be open to people, lifelong learning, not just 5 to 18. I should say 4 to 18. My daughter told me off for that as well. It should be open when needed, 24/7. It should be about enhancing human learning through impacting on their communities. And we need that mix of content, skills, the application of information, and attributes. What we need is SCOME. Not school, not home, SCOME, the education system for the information age. Automation age, I updated it. It was the information age in the good old days when we were doing it. But heck, how do we get there from here? Because we all know how difficult it is to change education systems. Christensen and colleagues have this model for disruptive change. And what they say is, if you've got an existing system that's got existing clients who are doing okay against some existing performance measures, and you bring in a disruptive innovation like a new model of schooling, there's a lot of catching up to do before you're as good as the existing system. And in that situation, the incumbents nearly always win. And what you need to do if you want to bring about significant change is you need to, first of all, compete against non-consumption. In the context of school, that means deal with the kids who are not being dealt with by the current system, those who are excluded or who are failing in the existing system. So deal with them and come up with metrics that work for them. And in that situation, the new entrants nearly always win. And in Australia, they're doing exactly this. So big picture schools, which are kind of SCOMey in several ways. They're about passion projects. They're about kids actually working, having real jobs in the community at least 1 or 2 days a week. They're about parental involvement. There's no assessment as such except presentations to the local community. And what they're doing, which is really interesting, they've got mainstream schools with their standard programs, their standard provision, and then they're tacking on big picture academies. And they're saying, you can apply to move from the standard program into the big picture academy stream. And in some schools, it's aimed at the gifted and talented kids, who they want to stretch more through the big picture process. In some schools, it's the kids who are being excluded and who are failing in the existing system. In some schools, it's just any kid who thinks, oh, that looks more fun. And guess what? They're helping to refine the big picture model. They're providing evidence of how efficient and how effective it is, and more people are opting out, opting across. But you know, the problem is assessment. Those new metrics, that's the killer. Because summative assessment drives curriculum and it drives pedagogy. Teachers quite rightly do what they're held accountable against. They should do that. The problem is we hold them accountable against the wrong things. And actually often the high stakes assessment isn't really about the kids at all. It's about the quality of the school. It's about the league tables. And of course terminal exams, aptly named in my view, are great if you're interested in content, but are absolutely useless for most of those other things. We've got to be able to do better. And I don't have the answers, but I have some kind of thoughts about directions of travel. So AI, data mining. Now this is one of the first challenges you meet in the education version of Minecraft. You have to get out of that valley, right? And you're leaving a digital footprint of everything you do. So you can look at how long do they try to get out? How persistent are they in solving the problem? How different is their solution to other people's solution? How creative have they been? To what extent do they talk to other people and get advice from other people? You can infer a lot from the digital footprint that gets left behind. But there are massive problems, ethically, about data ownership and about transparency. Transparency both in the sense of, do you know you are being assessed? But more importantly, can the system explain why they've come up with the judgment that they have? Because very often, AI systems can't or have bias built into them, which is concealed. So there's some big issues with that. And then there's point of learning, which I helped to develop with 2 of my colleagues. And Paul offers a completely new model, a completely new approach, which goes something like this. You agree some targets, some things that we're wanting to measure, if you will, and you agree what you'd see happening if someone was meeting those targets. Okay? And then you can make claims. So we could have a target about doing a really fantastic presentation. You are brilliant at doing public speaking, right? And so I could make claims saying, yeah, I've done that. Kieran, where is the handkerchief? Thank you. Yeah, done that. And Kieran could make a claim for me saying, yeah, I saw Peter doing that. And I could have an external assessor, an independent person saying, yep, I saw Peter doing that. And what you build up over time is multiple people making claims saying, I saw that person demonstrating that they had achieved that target. That's really quite credible. You build up over 3 months, half a dozen people who said, yeah, I've seen him do that on multiple occasions. He can do that. That's pretty convincing. Compared with exams, where you do some stuff and then you sit down for 3 hours, and if you're on a bad day, God help you. Or if you're bad at exams, God help you. I think Poll is more convincing in lots of ways. But of course, as with lots of systems, in a high-stakes context, there's a real danger of gaming the system. So we need to address some of those things. And of course, the real obvious alternative is open access. Why worry about the qualifications? You know, the OU's done it for 50 years. Open entry to our undergraduate programs. It works. But of course, that involves a massive paradigm shift, a mind flip from gaming the system, getting the credits, to thinking about actual learning. It involves you thinking about trust and meaningful engagement, where success is not measured by what I got given in a grade and an exam, but is about actually what I'm now able to do and competent doing. So to pull it all together, I hope I'm still on time. No one has waved at me yet to say you've got to shut up soon, Peter. Some key points, takeaways, as my son would say. You know, we are learning beings. Teaching should enhance how we learn. What we teach should empower people to act and influence the future. It is about knowledge, the ability to act in valued ways in particular contexts, skills and attributes. We've got to change the culture of high-stakes assessment, where the focus is more on gaming the system and manipulating the system and actually about measuring the school and how the school is doing than it is actually about learning. We've got to change that. It is a paradigm shift and we need it. We've got to move from distrust and coercion, from fining parents if their kids don't come to school, from penalising kids who misbehave, from forcing people to learn things that they don't understand the relevance of, to a system of trust where we believe people actually want to learn and where we support them to do that. And we need a strategy for doing it. And, you know, the strategy that I've suggested, you know, start with the low-hanging fruit. Start with those people who the system isn't currently supporting very well. Devise metrics, and this is the really hard bit, that show what they have learnt, but in meaningful ways. So we're measuring the things that matter, not just the things that it's easy to measure in a paper-based exam. Refine the model, because it's not going to be perfect to begin with. And demonstrate that it works, demonstrate its efficacy. And of course, you know, so I think what I hope I've convinced you that schooling currently is a problem, that actually solutions do exist, and there are other ones out there like big picture schools. The challenge for us really is, I'm looking at the mayor, does the political will? Thank you. We are going to have a panel discussion afterwards, but if you want to follow up, I blog at Half-Baked Education. My kids thought that was the inappropriate picture, that it should be something else. Some of the lucky people here will have got the MP3 pen, which has got the URL for the MP3 project, if you want to follow that up, and the Scone website is still there. I've been trying to kill it off since 2007, but without very much success. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.